Welcome. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to everyone who's joining us now on YouTube. It's really a pleasure to be able to facilitate this conversation for everyone who's being able to participate, all the family members and community members who are interested in learning a little bit about how to run Sederim or to improve the Sederim that they already run. And I'm really excited to be able to be part of that conversation. I'm hoping to learn a lot, in particular from our guests today, the people we'll be discussing this Sederim with, Rabbi Brownstein, the director of Jewish Studies at Hillel Torah, Rabbi Rosenbaum, the Rebbe and Mechanech at Ida Crown Jewish Academy. So it's really a privilege to be able to speak with you and discuss some of our ideas and topics together tonight. We'll be talking a lot about some of the practical matters of running a Seder in a little bit, but I just wanted to start with a personal question, which is if you'd be willing to share some parts of Sederim that you had growing up or memorable Seder experiences that stick out to you that maybe could be a model for what we're trying to create in our own Sederim. Rabbi Brownstein, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I went to a lot of great Seders as a kid, in my house and in other places. But I remember coming back from yeshiva when I was 19 years old, and I'm a Baal Tshuva myself. So I came back and my parents were kind of like, all right, you went to yeshiva, so now you're running the Sederim for the family and for the other community members of the community that we were part of. And so at 18, 19 years old, I was tasked with making sure that I knew all the halachas to make sure to present to everybody, having meaningful discussion questions, thinking of Hallel tunes, and making sure there was great shtick. And that continued. This was way before I thought about becoming a rabbi, but I remember, my brother and I, we would have a thing where if someone asked a good question, if they wanted candy, I would give them candy. If they wanted a joke, my brother would give them a cheesy Pesach joke. And between that and the lively Hallel singing till 2, 3 in the morning at night and meaningful discussions, I have very fond memories of those Sederim that I was leading, but I gained a lot from.
Rabbi Rosenbaum?
Wow, I can't top that. That's amazing. I just can't imagine the pressure like as a 19-year-old. But okay. So I grew up with a big family, and a lot of boys in my house. So as I got older, the discussions became more serious. A lot of Torah discussions. And, my father had each of us say like a serious Torah, and we were competitive. We would go at each other. So we had famous debates in the house about free will and, what does it mean that they had a slave mentality? So I definitely have fond memories of debates, and there's a lot of big booming voices and singing. And I remember a lot of the Sederim with my grandparents, 3 of whom are no longer with us, but they have a lot of stories from the Holocaust, from Europe. So those are also very meaningful for my Sederim.
So one trend I noticed in both of your answers is that both of you talked about some kind of like pressure to perform, right? You have to, and Mary Ramsey a little bit more extremely, but Rabbi Rosenbaum as well. Was that pressure productive? Was it, can you imagine it having been detrimental to your Seder? Like, should we think about, having higher expectations for people who are joining our Sederim?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think for the person leading the Seder, it's okay to feel a little bit of pressure, like if it makes you think a lot about the people at your Seder, what they're going to enjoy and what's going to challenge them and what's going to make it meaningful for them. So I think that's okay, a level of pressure for the person leading the Seder. I can't speak to the pressure as a kid. As a kid, I didn't feel that pressure. So, Ray Rosenbaum could speak to that. But certainly, I think a little bit of healthy pressure for the person leading the Seder to make sure that they're thinking about it in regards to the constituents who are going to be there for sure.
So yeah, I agree. I agree that there's, there should be some pressure on the person leading the Seder. It's, it's a big deal. Seder's a very big deal. People have a lot of nostalgia for it. They're very memorable and very important people's, for our own Emunah and Yiras Shamayim moving forward. But you mentioned another point about putting pressure on the other people, the other attendees. I think some pressure should be put on them. If there's someone, again, obviously you have to know your kids. And you have to know, and sometimes it's hard to know your guests. You have to try to feel out. But some kids can't be put on the spot. If you ask them to do something they're not prepared for, they're never gonna come to it. The little kids, they're they're primed to sing the Manashtana, to sing their songs. There's no pressure for them. They're super excited about it. They'll I remember like someone in my house pretending to be shy before they said the Manashtana, then booming it out. But for teenagers, if you wanna get a teenager to say Dvar Torah, I think maybe we'll talk about this a bit later. I think it is important to put a little bit of pressure, but like before the Seder, it's really important to give them time in advance to prepare something or to look at something, put it on the spot, especially if you have a Seder where there are multiple cousins and it's different groups. A 30 person Seder, that could be a lot of pressure.
Okay, so you mentioned preparation. I think that's a great place to start. We're a week out from first Sedarim, so there's still definitely time to prepare. What are some preparations that you're thinking about that we should be thinking about now, 7 days out, and not 1 or 2 days before?
Right.
And maybe more generally, at an extra nikuda. What are we trying to achieve here? Like, what are we planning for now that we're hoping to make happen on Wednesday night?
Sure. I mean, I mentioned before you have to know your kids, and you could think about what each child is going to be getting from this Seder, and the Haggadah itself gives us some goals to consider. Involvement is a key goal of the Baal Haggadah. We want the kids to ask the questions. We want the kids to be involved. So that's obviously one goal, and the preparation should be geared considering who the kid is and what kind of involvement you want them to be, you want them to have in the Haggadah. But another thing to consider is one of our goals is that it should be really, really memorable. I mean, there's an idea that like the goal of the Seder is to lead and imbue our Kriya Shema for the rest of the year. And this itself is its own Dvar Torah that I could spend a lot of time talking about. But we're asked to remember Yetzias Mitzrayim every day, but our experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim is the Seder. So actually, what we're remembering with Kriya Shema is the experience that we create at the Seder. So that is a big idea. You can say that sentence out, but a person has to go through the process of the Seder and understand. We were slaves. Hashem saved us in a specific way. He revealed Himself to us, and so that might be a whole set of themes that we want our children to grasp, even if we're not necessarily thinking about their Kriya Shema for the next 354 days till we come around to the next Pesach cycle, but to realize that obviously we want Yiras Shamayim, we want Masorah to be passed on. So that also demands preparation. So in that regard, and we've mentioned a few things, but preparing the right Divrei Torah. It's so commonplace, people to be like scanning through their Haggadah, right? Scanning through their Haggadah at the Seder, like looking for Dvar Torah, which in itself is like something to remember. I remember, but a person should look through, what Dvar Torah they want to say. Where are they going to talk about Chivas? Where are they going to talk about Avdus? Where are they going to talk about Geula? What is that favorite Dvar Torah that the Baal Haggadah is going to say? I think that demands definitely a lot of preparation. It's hard to get to have that perfect line to say, if you don't know what you're going to be saying before you get to the actual state.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of the minhag that people have. I didn't have this growing up, but I did this at my uncle's home when I was studying in yeshiva in Israel, of reading the Haggadah on Shabbos Gadol. And even a couple extra days, instead of sort of being caught off guard, I remember this is in the book, flipping through the pages now, you have at least a couple more days where the themes are circulating in your head and you're remembering old Divrei Torah you've heard before. That may be one way of trying to bring this before.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and definitely, I mean, the kids in school, I don't know, I was in high school, but like in elementary school, man, like from a month ago, from right after Purim, the Haggada's come out and the kids are doing the projects and the kids are doing the Haggadah and the middle school doing the Divrei Torah. So like, there's a lot of preparation happening for the kids, and I think there's definitely a level of it that the adults could learn from that. Maybe not in the same way, they're not spending half the day doing it, for a month, but that sense of preparation, because as Rosenbaum said, like, this is the night where we're mechazik and instill in our kids emunah for the year, or over time, like their emunah comes in a big way from these nights of the Pesach Seder. And so, I find that the Haggadah is also a really good guide about what's gonna be mechazik the muna of our children. There's going to be a lot of things I'll suggest later that you can add to what's in the Haggadah. But even if just everything that the Haggadah asks you to do, you have everyone do together, and you explain why we're doing it, and every part of Magid, you explain simply. So everything that's in the Haggadah, you do that from A to Z. That is what the Bali Haggadah thought would best instill a muna in the kids. So I think for me, a lot of the preparation is coming like, how do I explain what to do to the people at the Seder? Even my kids, like, okay, we're all going to do this. Then we're going to do this. Ready? And, making sure the actions, like they understand how to do them. And, Magid, like, okay, there's a lot of paragraphs that are really confusing. How can I explain that in a way that's simple and that's easy for my age kids to understand? Thinking of good questions to throw out so they'll be interested, but all of those things kind of along the framework of the Haggadah itself. I think that will, if just doing that in a way that's good for the people at your Seder, that in itself can give so much in terms of what you want for Seder night. I'll just add one thing to kind of put over Rosenbaum has said, like, the night's about Yetziat Mitzrayim, and it's about redemption, and it's about Hashem. And so there's sometimes you can get caught up in a conversation for like 15 minutes about something that's like not about that. And what you want is to almost do your best. Obviously, things naturally come up, but to think about what questions you want to throw out there that'll lead people to that. What parts of the Haggadah could open up discussions about those things, so that you're kind of not at the whim of whatever people talk about, but also you've thought about some ways to take the parts of the Haggadah and bring them out for people in terms of Amunah and in terms of Hashem, so that those are the core of what people are talking about throughout the Seder.
Yeah, that's really good. In that context, I was thinking, there are a lot of themes in the Haggadah, and I've heard that people make theme-based Sedarim. They'll choose a theme, and I feel like if you can tell people, I'd like to discuss tonight, for the next half hour, if you see anything in the Haggadah that connects to the theme of Kedusha or the theme of Bechira, and people will find it. People will be honed in, especially teenagers. They'll be honed into the text to try to find, where they could pick up on that theme and what they could add to that conversation, especially if you do advanced warning. You can also have goofy themes. I know this works for little kids, even though I was asked to speak about teenagers, but hold on.
You're a parent of little kids. You have the right to say something.
Exactly. My oldest is 12. So, but imagine if the theme of the Seder was not just Cheiros, but there was like a much bigger overarching theme that added like a goofy flavor to the Seder. And again, you have to know your kids. But like, let's say you had a Star Wars themed Seder. Seems kind of strange, but I actually heard of a family that did this, and every year there's like another like movie based theme, and they still have to give the same Divrei Torah, but like it excites the kids. The kids get interested and try to figure out how to how to fit the theme in that sense.
That's interesting. You're saying that I happen to be a big Harry Potter guy, and I have this Haggadah to the Harry Potter Haggadah, and I always thought it was the funniest thing, but maybe there's actually something to that of getting your kids, all to connect to some sort of theme that they're into to make it really interesting. I like that idea. That's very cool.
I think that idea of personalizing the Haggadah, personalizing the experience, is actually in the Haggadah. Let's pick up on your point, or Brownstein, about how the Haggadah tells us what to do. That sentence where we say of the purpose of that sentence is not to say that like Yitzias Mitzrayim repeats itself every year. The purpose of that sentence is to say, like, just like the bris bein and Besarim stood for us in Mitzrayim, it continues to stand for you at the Seder every day. And so that is it. Like, it's an ask. The Balaga is asking us to consider how this might be personal to the individuals who are there. And I think that's also, a call for preparation. A person might have stories of their own, either themselves or their parents or grandparents. And it's a night of history. I remember, Vincent, you said before, like, you shouldn't bring up side conversations that are not like beside the point. But I think family lore is part of what we're supposed to be discussing.
Definitely.
For sure. for sure. So you have family lore, you want to put it in, you know, tell your children, you know, this is how your family was saved, you know, 100 years ago, 60 years ago, whatever it is. For sure. Holocaust stories, for sure.
Yeah. One theme that I was thinking about in advance of tonight is sort of balancing, like making the Seder new and different every year and keeping some of those like touch points, right? You know, the things we remember from Sederim growing up are not the things that we did once. They're the things that we've done for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And Zadie says the same 6 Divrei Torah, makes the same 4 bad jokes. And those are things that stick with you because they're so habitual. And I think you've offered a lot of insight into like ways to add new ideas, obviously staying loyal to the themes and the text of the Haggadah in some way, and about, you know, figuring out what themes are important to, let's say, your family, right? Imagining retelling a family history every year at the Seder seems like a thing that could happen every year and it wouldn't feel stale, while kind of freshening up some things that might need to be kept a little bit more lively.
Sure.
We've been speaking a little bit, I guess, like intellectually, you know, about ideas and about themes. Let's, you know, flip the question for a second. Okay, thinking about, you know, engaging maybe some of the youngest members of our Sederim, or even older members who just need a little bit more energy, a little bit more activity. Do you have any thoughts on activities, on games, on ways to, you know, keep the Seder high energy and exciting for people who might not connect directly to the ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's so important. I remember growing up as a kid, we'd go to this family who they had like a kiruv shul in Portland, Oregon, where I grew up. And you'd get there, their Sederim were outside in this tent because they had like a ton of people who would come. And they had every year that I don't know where they would keep these things during the year, but they had like, you know, life-size paros and life-size pyramids and like a huge scene and tons of costumes. And at some point in the Seder, I don't know, they must have done like Kiddush, you know, first few things, whatever, gets started with Magid, whole Seder would pause and like all the kids would go and dress up and put together the scene and act it out. And, you know, then the Seder would continue after that. And I don't know if I don't do that exactly, but I think there's something to being able to have props and act things out. I know little kids love to act out. They love to pretend this person's this person and this person's the other person and act out different stories. So, you know, I think one thing you could do is to choose either a part of the Yetziat Mitzrayim story or the whole thing, but mix up the characters and to really use drama as a way of engaging the kids at any point in the Seder, whether it's before the whole thing starts or after Kiddush or as, you know, whatever time you think is going to be good. But that's one thing I would definitely say. Another thing I would say is singing and dancing, Hallel for sure, but and other times where you have parts of the Haggadah that can be songs, and it can even be parts of not songs that are not part of the Haggadah but fit with the theme, you know. But to get kids singing and to get, you know, people up and dancing at different parts in the Seder, I found that kids love that. They don't expect it, and it imbues the whole thing with like a huge sense of simcha. Yeah, so acting and drama, singing and dancing. Another thing we did as, you know, as a kid, and even as when I led my own Sederim, lots of prizes. Like the Gemara talks about how, you know, the you know, Chazal would give things out to the kids during the Sederim, or do things like having them steal the matzos. Maybe that's, you know, our afikomen, but to keep them awake and keep them interested. And so whether it's prizes for good questions, or it's prizes for answering questions, or it's prizes for just staying awake and participating, but, you know, having ways of giving kids, you know, whether it's candy, or I know a family that actually uses nuts, just like the Gemara, and the kids are really into it, but whatever floats your family's boat and get your kids into it, to lots of prizes and you know, rewards for things like that and engagement. I think during the Seder that creates a lot of fun as well.
Awesome. I've been asking some of my my teenage students, you know, what they remember about this, what nostalgia they have. So first off, we should just appreciate the fact that we're doing all right. Like every single student has nostalgia for the Pesach Seder. That was like really
so good here. Amazing.
Yeah, it's really good. But one of the seniors says that his Zadie used to give out like walnuts, but not just walnut like pieces, like a whole walnut in the shell. And like, you got this walnut, it was like a whole big deal. You had to get like the nutcracker and like you would crack it open. Like we would try to like, you know, whatever. It was like a whole big ASEC. And I think that obviously kept people up. So like, you know, you can give out a chocolate, you give a marshmallow, that's great. But like, imagine like you had little marshmallows and then one kid asks a really question like, oh, that deserves a big marshmallow. You take out a big marshmallow. I mean, again, even teenagers have nostalgia for these things. They think it's funny, that's memorable for them. They know that the Seder is a time for that cute things will happen and goofy things will happen, and serious and meaningful things will happen as well. And they're ready for it. They're ready for it, and it still works for teenagers. And one thing I'll just add, the Makos are a big time for props. I mean,
definitely.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Seder has props, right? The whole Ka'ara is a set of props, talking them out. But for sure, the Makos, Jello for Makas Dam is a classic. I spent hours with my brother trying to figure out how to release frogs at the table for a Seder. We never released live frogs, but we really thought a lot about how we might do it.
I would not have come to that Seder. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. One of my students told me this amazing idea. One of my students told me that his parents would take little pieces of orange, like the pulp from orange, like the little like circle things, and they would freeze them in ice cubes so that it was like barad. It was like hail, and you can see like the orange fire inside the ice cube. That's a really cool prop. And just to continue with role playing. So I mean, to ask kids to play B'nai Yisrael and ask some other kids to play, perhaps older kids, teenagers are into this, make them play Egyptians. It can go out really well. It worked out really well, and you want to end that. You want to end that scene. I've participated in one of these. You get like a really big blue sheet, and it is the blue sheet has the role of the Yam, and B'nai Yisrael come, and the little kids are there. They have to say some tefillah, have to say some prayer, about Hashem saving them from the Mitzrayim. And you have the older kids, teenagers or whatever, and they play the role of the charioteers and the officers. And I think they're okay with that because they see the kids. They also know what it's what it's about. And then the blue sheet parts, will go through, and you smother the teenagers with the sheet. I think it works out well. The kids are laughing, and the teenagers are involved as well. I've seen it done to very good effect.
Yeah, the Makos definitely are like just prime for props. I mean, you can get so creative. You go online, you could look like, I mean, one year we all got army helmets, and we got a ton of ping pong balls, and we just would, there'd be like the people out of the army helmets, people that were throwing the barad, and just have like a ping pong ball fight in the middle of the Seder. That was a great one. Things, but there's just the Makos you can get really creative with, and even other parts of the Seder. Off the top of my head, they don't roll off as easily, but like props and shtick is just a great way to get kids engaged.
For sure. Some of the Haggadahs have like really awesome art in them. I have a few really old Haggadahs that have like beautiful paintings in them that you could really sit and analyze if you have an attendee who's really into art. And also, I really like Gadi Pollock's Haggadah. He has a Haggadah with very serious art. He's an excellent artist. And kids really get really into it, but it is pretty intense. So, and graphic. So if you should just consider it and know your audience. I recommended it to Rabbi Brand. Rabbi Brand said, he said, I can't use this at the Seder. He gave it to someone else. But I think I recommend it, and consider for yourself if it works for your Seder. I think it's excellent art inside.
Yeah. Also, your kids, I mean, people, especially little kids, come with so many projects. So if you have a good sense of what the Haggadahs include or their projects include, you can also use that as a way to engage the kids because they're the ones who made the projects. So if it's time for yachats and the kids made something with a matzah breaks, so they can stand up and show it to everybody. Or you also you have some they made something for Manish Tana, they made something for the Mako, they made something for the Karpas, for the leaning, for anything, and have them getting up and showing it, or that page of their Haggadah and like showing it and showing what they did. It engages that one kid. But I think if kids also have a chance to present what they've done and they've worked really hard for Pesach, that's also a way of getting them excited because they feel proud of their own work and they get to share it with the people at the Seder.
Nice, for sure.
The example of leaning is one that I always loved. Also one I didn't do growing up, but I was jealous of those who did. Just thinking about Right? The idea of leaning, and without getting into the whole halacha or history of proper ways to lean, part of it comes from thinking about ways to not feel like you're sitting at a dinner table the way that you do every other day of the year. So if you make the night feel a little different, let's say you do Magid, everyone's lounging around in the living room on the couches, and it gives you a lot more room to play. You're not right near the table. You mess up all the spring cleaning, crumbs get everywhere, so you have to be willing to do that. But it's just a little thing you could do to feel like, oh, Manashana Halayla has that, where we're doing something a little different than normal.
But you changed the place where the Seder was, or in the middle of the Seder you would leave?
So there are different, people who do this do it in different ways. Some people do the whole Seder, leaning on their couches. Some people will eat their meal at the table because, who would have it otherwise? You just clean free on diff. But other parts of the Seder, you don't have to be stuck in the same place, right? So if the kids are acting through that in the living room, everyone can go out to the living room. And it's just like a little visual marker that also sets off, oh, we're doing something a little different.
Interesting. I imagine there's a risk of like certain older people falling asleep in the middle of the Seder, lying on the couch.
We're going to get to that question later.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we talk about older people, just middle-aged people, let's say, we're talking about people who are running Sedarim, right? So they might have run Sedarim before, and a lot of the thought often goes to like what makes this a meaningful experience for kids, which I think is really appropriate. Obviously, one of the major themes of the Seder night is the Higadat Levincha and transmitting the story. But are there specific things or ways of thinking about how to make the Seder something that's specifically meaningful for adults as well, that wouldn't necessarily be in the realm of like the kitsch, but would somehow be something you plan for yourself, that this makes the Seder meaningful for me, not just for my children.
Right.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was mostly running Sedarim for adults my whole life until I just had kids the last few years. So I feel like, one thing that engages adults is people like the chance to share something that they are thinking about or something that they're wondering. And so try to give as many opportunities as you can for people to talk and to share and to make them feel like they have something to say. If you have a certain crowd, you can maybe have people give you Torah, but I think there are a lot of really, really good questions that you could ask surrounding the Haggadah that could get people really interested and have a lot of opinions about. Questions like why were they in slavery in the first place? Or where does the Pesach story really start? And why do you think that? Or, why did they need all the makkah in the first place? Why couldn't Hashem just taken them out? Like big questions. Like these are questions that, the Mefarshim themselves are all over the place on. There's so many opinions. So really everyone at the table could have something to say and something intelligent to offer. And so I think, thinking about big questions that are open-ended, that anyone could have an opinion about, I think thinking about those questions in advance and how to ask them. And I think that's one way to engage adults and people feel like they have something to say. I think that's great. Another thing is, similarly, but more like, you're reading a paragraph in Magid. So again, if someone has a Torah prepared, that's one thing. But another thing is, to have people take a second and say, what do you wonder about what you just read? What interests you what you just read? What bothers you about what you just read? Like get people to actually think as they're reading. Because I know for myself, you go through Magid, if it's late and you're already you're drinking a cup of wine or whatever, you're kind of already like, sometimes it's easy to make it rote. But if you have people stop and say, what bothers you? What do you wonder about what you just read? Kind of people have a chance to ask themselves and their own questions and to connect personally. So that's another way to get adults engaged in the Seder.
Yeah, for sure. Asking people, and I would add just asking people, maybe it's hard for some people to do this, but ask other people to lead certain sections of the Haggadah. If you're okay with someone else reading a paragraph or, perhaps a specific paragraph, yeah, for sure. I was thinking about the 4 cups of wine, and one of the interpretations that the Gemara in Yerushalmi gives, where the 4 cups of wine comes from, is that it's the 4 cups that appear in the Sar HaMashkin's dream that Yosef interprets, which seems like totally random. Like, why would that be the origin of the 4 cups? Like, okay, great, it's in Mitzrayim. So there are many answers. This is a kind of classic question, but one answer is that Yosef was in prison, and Yosef got out. And this is the process how Yosef got out. The Sar HaMashkin, interpreting the dream and talking to someone, etc. So what does that do with Yetzias Mitzrayim? Well, maybe not so much, but it has to do with these themes of geula. And I think this is another way to get people involved. Just to put it out there. Like, imagine a person had Jonathan Pollard at their Seder, and Mr. Pollard suddenly started talking about what it was like to be in prison. So nobody in their right mind would say, Mr. Pollard, we're having the Haggadah here. We'll talk about that tomorrow. Like, no, like that. This is exactly what we're talking about. This is the theme of Galus and Geula, and he experienced it. Let's hear what he has to say. So if there are people in attendance, have great stories, have real serious experiences, perhaps you can ask them beforehand if they'd be comfortable sharing. If there's a survivor, if there's someone who's been through an experience like Lolaine, or like what happened to Jonathan Pollard or Gilad Shalit or whatever. Like those are serious discussions. I saw in there's a Haggadah by Dr. Abraham J. Twersky, where he talks about a father trying to explain what Avdus is to his kid, and his kid had been a kid at risk, and he'd been addicted to serious drugs, and the kid where Dr. Twersky tells the story of how the kid said, like, would you even know what slavery is? Let me tell you about slavery. And the kid goes on to explain what it was like to be addicted. So those are serious experiences. If there are adults or who in the room who may have something to share in that area, for sure, ask them beforehand if they're okay, and then ask them to share in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I first of all, that's really powerful. I don't, I think even maybe like this is much less serious than what you're saying, but like even, the average person, maybe you don't have something like to that degree to share, but it could be that on your level, there's something maybe just to like add it, even to the average person, you might have something to share that's on your level. So for example, if, where was a time where you felt you couldn't choose, where was a time where you felt like, you felt constricted and then, you were free. And what was a time where you felt like you wanted something so badly and it just wasn't coming, being able to, like, even for the average layman, have those connection points. The Baal Seder can think about what are questions you could ask that could get people to think about their own lives in the context of it, so that the personal story today, like you said, Rabbi Rosenbaum, can also come through in their reading of the Haggadah and their experiencing of the Yetziat Mitzrayim.
For sure.
Shifting gears maybe to some, a very, very practical question. But we're thinking about creating this experience, and there are a couple of obstacles that might come up, just things that we can imagine being a little bit difficult. One that's probably very ubiquitous is feeling like Magid's dragging on a little bit, we haven't eaten, we're getting hungry, and all these great ideas that we planned in advance, at some point, people are kind of, rubbing their bellies and saying, okay, like, it's very nice, I'd love to hear another story, but I'd also love to get to the muscle. Any thoughts on how to either, sort of plan around that or, obviate that those kinds of, impediments?
Yeah. I mean, I'd just like to state a couple of obvious points. One is like there are two Sedarim. If you live outside of Israel, you could do it twice. So you can like pick and choose, which paragraphs to focus on, which ones to move faster. And I think like it has to be said at every Seder. Like, let's save this Torah for Shulchan Aruch. When we're eating, that's another thing. But a few other points. This is funny. My earliest memory, nostalgia. My earliest memory of a Seder is like with my knees on the floor, leaning over a chair, eating a matzah and cheese sandwich. And this is like way before anyone's eating anything else at the Seder. And I just think of myself eating a matzah and cheese sandwich. I must have been like just about to do Kiddush or something like that. But what I'm trying to say is, we have a decorum that we normally have at a Seudah, which is, we start with Kiddush, and then we wash, and only then do we eat. And the Seder kind of breaks that mold, right? We have Kiddush, and then short after that is a karpas, and everybody's taking like, make sure you have less than a kazayas of karpas, because you don't want to have like a bracha levatola, and stuff like brachos, etc. And you think like, okay, so there's no eating, right? You have Kiddush, karpas, and like don't eat anything. But maybe that is a little bit of a mistake, especially if you're going to be giving out some candies or some prizes. Maybe this doesn't work for adults, that they're going to feel uncomfortable. But perhaps they could eat some other things afterwards. One of my kids is really into karpas, and he just got the whole magid. He's just eating basically every piece of karpas, and that's how he makes it through. We think about just the glass of wine, but a person can drink in between the glasses of wine, right? They could drink water. They could kind of stay themselves off to get to get to Shulchan Aruch, to get there. So I'll just put that out there, that there is a possibility of consuming other things before getting to Shulchan Aruch.
On behalf of the Kollel, I feel obligated to say, talk to your local Orthodox rabbi, but no, it's a point well taken, especially for kids.
Yeah.
Think about planning for that.
Yeah, that's a great list of things. I don't know. I'm trying to think if I have anything to add. I struggle with this myself. I feel like maybe just 2 points to add. One would be, it's okay to abandon ship and just go. Like if you realize, you had like a half an hour discussion, surrounding the Arba Bunim, and you're way off target and the kids are getting restless. It's okay to say, okay, some of the parts of Magid, we're going to just move through, we're going to go quicker. That's okay. I don't feel there's like this pressure Seder. I know I feel it, kids, we talked about it before, like you want everything to be awesome. You want everything to be perfect. And also it's okay to say like, all right, I think what's best for the kids right now is for us to get to Dayenu or get to, the Makos, whatever it is. That's okay. And another point might be, kind of what Rabbi Rosenbaum was saying about Shulchan Aruch. There's other Yom Tov meals. I mean, this year especially, we got 3 days of Yom Tov. We got 6 Yom Tov meals, and you're allowed to say Divrei Torah at all of them. So you could really, if your kids have Divrei Torah, things they want to share, you could say, okay, like, who's gonna talk at lunch? Who's gonna, really like encourage them to share Divrei Torah at other times? And maybe, and maybe one more thing I would say is that, Magid is great. It's awesome. It's a huge part of the Seder. But also at the end of Magid, I want my kids to be able to be awake for matzah and maror and korech. Like these are big parts of the Seder. So I think sometimes, it's what's at stake if Magid's way too long. What's at stake is like they're going to sleep, before they have a chance to eat the matzah, which would stink because you want your kids to be a part of that. So I think it's okay to move through things if you need to, and certainly on the other end, you have a chance to participate and learn how to do and engage in like those big mitzvot at the other end of Magid, which are a lot of fun and they'll love and are very important.
Yeah.
It also just occurred to me that some of the things we were talking about before, not the Magid specific things, acting out the Mako or things like that, but having someone at the Seder share a story that's meaningful to them, or some of the bigger discussions are things that are really amenable to talking about while you're, having a main course, and you don't really need to be bound to a text at that time. So maybe planning what things are going to be Magid things, what things are going to be meal things, and just require a little bit of extra work to kind of keep the spirit of learning alive for an extra 45 minutes, however long your Shulchan Aruch goes. Sometimes in my experience, you can have a Seder where you get through Magid and it was really meaningful, and now you're ready to relax. So you have to put a little extra legwork in to say, okay, but also Shulchan Aruch is going to be meaningful in a different way.
Right.
But I think planning for that could make that work. Also, same question on the other end, right? We talked about hunger and Magid. By the time you get to the end of the Seder, and you've got Hallel and Nirtza and Rabbi Bramson, you were talking about a lot of the singing and dancing that's very important. And people are tired. I'm curious if you'd give similar advice or different advice for planning for that. Right.
So I'm going to say a couple of pieces at the end. They're very song filled. There's Hallels to, you have to finish Hallel, another cup of wine there, but that should be really like sung. Real tunes. If there's if there are famous family tunes that you like, then great. If there you want to try a new one, go for it. But the singing is definitely key. And then after Hallel, there are all these like more curious songs, right? Echa Miyodea, etc. So I mean, in Echa Miyodea, it's a song that you can go along with hand motions, right? You count up the numbers, or you make up your own, or you see how fast you can say it with holding your breath, like the Seres B'nai Haman or something. And And in Chad Gadya, obviously, I remember seeing it with also as fast as you can, but but to have like the animal noises in Chad Gadya, and there's lots of ways to make that artificially exciting just by acting out the content of the actual songs.
Yeah, I'd agree. Definitely Chad Gadya to do that, and Echad Yodea has that potential. I'd say even for the Hallel, where Rosemary said like to sing, I have a gada that I've used, I think, for like 10 years, and next to each paragraph of Hallel is written like the nigun that first year I decided was going to be for that, part of Hallel. And now, like years later, when I look at that paragraph, it's like that's the tune that comes to me year after year. So I think like there are so many tunes that can go well with the classic like Tehillim, pasuk with the comma in the middle, these Karlbach tunes that we sing for Lechadodi and all the time. Like you don't have to be a big chazan or anything to take any nigun you like and just spend a second before the Seder and think about how could this fit into this. Okay, you have to force some lines and stuff. Fine, that's part of the fun of it. But really, to take whatever nigunim you like and put them to Hallel. Think of what songs what nigunim the kids like. Even if there's no tune for that part of Hallel, you could make one and make it able that everyone could really join in and sing.
Nice.
Okay, I think we're close to wrapping up for the evening. But I'll tell you, on the one hand, I'm incredibly empowered by a lot of the ideas that we're talking about. Some of these seem pretty easy to implement. But it was also a lot of content and a lot of ideas that we were talking about. And to properly prepare a Seder based on our 40 minutes of conversation would take substantially longer than that. So for people who are maybe feeling a little bit daunted, for people who are open to trying new things in their Sederim, I hope are the people who are watching this, maybe feel a little bit overwhelmed. Do you have any closing words of advice or chizuk, something you might tell a person to kind of encourage them to make this year's Seder one step better than they've ever made?
I think I would say just make sure that it's fun and you have a smile and that you're positive, and don't sweat all the small stuff about this doesn't go exactly the way I wanted to, or I planned this and it's not working out. Like the main thing the kids are going to remember and the adults are going to remember is that it was fun and you had a smile and it was full of simcha, and that's what you want them to walk away with. So I really think like at the end of the day, the mitzvah is to have a Seder and to have it, with all the people at your table, and just to really like make sure that it's positive and you have a smile, and not to get hung up on little things. And if it doesn't go exactly the way it is, that's you want it to be, that's okay. And so I think that would be my piece of chizuk with all the planning, to have that in mind, so that at the end your kids, think, wow, dad, mom, like, grandparents, everyone was happy the whole time and had a good time and it was positive.
Awesome. Flexibility, right?
Totally.
For sure. I'll just say one thing. I was actually inspired by what Rabbi Brownson just said about finding his comments about what tunes to use and having it in his actual Haggadah. People have to realize like there's a big mystery who the author of the Haggadah is, and something we should consider is that like it developed over time. As they first the Mishnayos describing which psukim to say and how to tell the story, and for us to realize that the identity of the Baal Haggadah might be a mystery, but each person leading the Seder is also literally the Baal Haggadah. If you add one little note in your Haggadah, this year I'm going to do this, and you put it down somewhere, you actually have some kind of note. Then the next year you add another thing, and there'll be another. You hold last year's note and this year's note. Then eventually, you're quoting your own Haggadah, and you were the Baal Haggadah, and now you are the Baal Haggadah. I think that's a powerful idea, I think.
Rabbi Rosenbaum, that's incredible. Rabbi Brownstein. Thank you, both of you, very, very much for your time, for your insight, from your personal experience and your educational experience. It was definitely enlightening for me, and I hope it was enlightening for the others who joined us tonight. And I think really empowering, again, with a lot of really practical, concrete ideas, concrete mindsets, and that I think can really make a real difference in the next week in preparing the Sederim that we always hope to create. So thank you everyone who joined us, all the members of our broader global community. Thank you again to Rabbi Brownstein and Rabbi Rosenbaum for sharing of your time and insights. And I'd like to wish everyone a Chag Kasher V'Sameach.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This was wonderful. Thank you. This was wonderful. Chag Kasher v'Sameach to everybody.
So nice. Thank you.